to understand the magnitude of Machu Picchu, we'll have to see it from very high above.
Look at that. There we go. Who's that? That could be one of them. Yeah, it looks like it's on a bit of a terrace.
What we don't see is that 60% is underground.
They told us Machu Picchu was a palace in the clouds. They told us it was a temple for the sun or a fortress to hide from terrifying enemies. For over 100 years, that was the story.
Machu Picchu is the most impressive living testimony of Inca civilization.
It's absolutely breathtaking.
But now, scientists have uncovered something that forced experts to reconsider everything. Hidden deep within the site was evidence of a purpose far older and far more calculated than anyone imagined. In a most simple terms, what are we looking for? He drew eyes. That might be from before the angle. And curiously, it wasn't the first time someone suspected it. Declassified documents show even Nazi researchers came here during World War II, convinced the site held secrets lost to modern civilization. They may have been right. Machu Picchu wasn't built here by chance. It was built because of something buried beneath it. The impossible city in the clouds. In 1911, an ambitious American explorer named Hiram Bingham set out on an expedition into the Peruvian Andes. Bingham was a Yale professor with a passion for adventure and history, an American explorer named Hiram Bingham. He was Indiana Jones. He was 6'4". He looked like a Hollywood idol. He was a man obsessed with his mission, and he was driven by the romantic quest to find the last refuge of the Inca Empire. Historical records suggested that when Spanish conquistadors conquered Cusco in the 16th century, surviving Inca nobles fled into the remote jungles and mountains. Their stronghold, known as Vilcabamba, became legendary as the site of the Incas' final resistance before they were crushed in 1572. Bingham arrived in Cusco with the backing of Yale University and the National Geographic Society, determined to track down this lost city. He heard rumors from locals about overgrown ruins hidden high above the Urubamba River. Villagers spoke of ancient terraces and stone walls, but to outsiders, these were dismissed as local myths. Guided by Quechua farmers and a young boy from the area, Bingham climbed through dense vegetation and steep mountain trails. The journey was brutal. Hot, humid jungle at the base gave way to cold mountain ridges, slippery paths, and cliffs that seemed to rise forever. Bingham was not expecting to find anything significant that day. His focus was Vilcabamba, and Machu Picchu was not on his map. Yet as he reached a narrow ridge nearly 2,430 meters above sea level, the forest suddenly broke, and what he saw stopped in his tracks. Hidden by centuries of overgrowth were towering stone terraces, temples, staircases, and plazas built with the kind of precision that defined Inca engineering. It wasn't a scattered ruin or a handful of stone huts. It was an entire city in the clouds, untouched since the fall of the empire. The most shocking part was not the stonework itself, impressive as it was, but the location. Machu Picchu sat like a crown on a knife-edge ridge between two towering peaks, Machu Picchu Mountain and Huayna Picchu. On either side, sheer cliffs plunged almost 500 meters down to the raging Urubamba River below. From the valley floor, the city was invisible. You could stand directly beneath it and never know it was there. Bingham was so overwhelmed that he convinced himself he had found the legendary lost city of the Incas. Newspapers around the world ran with the story, and suddenly this remote ruin in the Andes was front-page news. Writers called it the city in the clouds, and photographs of its terraces and temples captured global fascination. People asked, how could the Incas, without modern machinery, have built something so large, so complex, in such a treacherous place?
The Inca are really well known for their incredible stonework, which is called ashlar masonry, and the stone fit together perfectly without any mortar.
Even Bingham struggled to make sense of it. Why would an empire choose to build a city on a ridge so narrow that one wrong step meant death? Why risk transporting stones, food, and people up a mountain spine cut off for an easy travel and farming? This was the first great puzzle of Machu Picchu. The stonework revealed masterful engineering. The temples reflected deep spiritual meaning, but the location, perched high in the Andes, with no clear strategic or agricultural advantage, defied all logic. For decades, scholars debated its true purpose, offering theory after theory, with no clear answer. Then, in 2025, a new discovery changed everything. What researchers found buried beneath the site has forced historians to rethink everything we thought we knew. Machu Picchu, it turns out, wasn't built where it was by accident, and the reason why has left experts stunned. But before that discovery surfaced, the search for meaning had taken many strange turns. The official theories of scholars. One of the earliest and most widely accepted explanations was the royal estate theory. According to this view, Machu Picchu was built during the reign of Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, the emperor who transformed the Inca kingdom into a vast empire in the 15th century. Scholars suggested that Pachacuti used the city as a kind of summer palace or personal retreat, far removed from the bustling capital of Cusco. The setting, surrounded by sacred mountains, flowing rivers, and dramatic landscapes, seemed ideal for a ruler who combined politics, religion, and ceremony in every part of his life. Archaeologists pointed to the presence of finely built residences and temples, arguing that only a royal estate could justify such luxury. But even here, questions remained. If it was only a palace, why was it built in such a remote, hard-to-access place instead of near Cusco, where labor and supplies were easier to manage? Another major explanation was the astronomical observatory theory. The Incas were known for their deep connection to the stars and the cycles of the sun and moon. At Machu Picchu, features like the Intihuatana stone, often called the hitching post of the sun, seem to confirm this. During solstices, the stone casts precise shadows that align with celestial events. Some temple windows also appear to frame the rising and setting sun on key calendar days. Scholars argued that Machu Picchu could have served as a center for priest astronomers who studied the heavens and timed festivals, planting and harvests according to celestial movements. This was a persuasive theory, but again, why would such an observatory be built in a location so isolated and difficult to reach? Others leaned toward the idea of Machu Picchu as a religious pilgrimage site. In Inca culture, the landscape itself was sacred. Mountains were seen as living spirits, known as apus, and rivers were believed to carry divine energy. Machu Picchu's dramatic setting seemed perfectly aligned with these beliefs. Scholars suggested that pilgrims may have journeyed up to Machu Picchu to take part in rituals, sacrifices, and festivals dedicated to the gods. The city's temples and fountains supported this view. Yet, if it was a pilgrimage site, why wasn't it more accessible? Most pilgrimage centers are meant to draw crowds, not hide them. There was also the fortress or refuge theory. Its location made Machu Picchu nearly impossible to invade. The ridge is flanked by sheer cliffs, and the only access routes are narrow and easily defensible. This suggested it might have served as a military outpost or an emergency retreat for the Inca elite. However, there is little evidence of fortifications or weapons, and no signs of battle have ever been uncovered at the site. As a fortress, it looked impressive, but the evidence was thin. Finally, there was Bingham's own first conclusion, the lost capital theory. When he discovered Machu Picchu, he was convinced it was Vilcabamba, the last stronghold of the Inca resistance against the Spanish. For years, he promoted this idea, and the world accepted it. Only later did further research show that the real Vilcabamba lay much deeper in the jungle, and Machu Picchu had been abandoned long before the Spanish ever arrived. But not all theories came from academics. Some were darker, stranger, and far more controversial. The darker and more controversial theories. Some theories went much further, painting the city as something darker, more forbidden, and perhaps even sinister. These ideas didn't come only from archaeologists, but also from early excavations, dramatic claims, and later, fringe writers who saw Machu Picchu as more than just stone walls in the Andes. One of the most unsettling ideas was the claim of human sacrifice. When archaeologists in the early 20th century began examining the burials at Machu Picchu, they found that many of the skeletal remains belonged to young women, not warriors or elderly nobles. This fueled speculation that the city was a temple of virgins, where chosen women were brought to live and die as offerings to the gods. Some believed they were part of the Inca Akla system, women selected for weaving, brewing chicha, or ritual sacrifice. While later studies showed that the burials were more mixed than first thought, the rumor of virgin sacrifices stuck and gave Machu Picchu a grim reputation. Another interpretation was the necropolis theory, the idea that Machu Picchu was never meant to be a living city at all, but instead a sacred burial ground. The setting, high above the clouds, close to the gods, and hidden from the world below, made it an ideal place to bury the elite. Some researchers argued that temples and plazas were designed for funerary rituals rather than daily life. Then there were those who insisted Machu Picchu was a secret refuge. Because the city is invisible from the valley below, some argued it was intentionally built to hide survivors of the Inca Empire from the Spanish conquest. The steep cliffs, narrow access routes, and surrounding jungle would have made it nearly impossible for outsiders to find. Yet the city was abandoned long before the Spanish ever reached the region, leaving this theory in doubt. By the late 20th century, Machu Picchu also became the focus of occult and mystical theories. New Age writers claimed it was part of a global network of ley lines, which are invisible energy currents running across the earth. They argued the Incas had tapped into this energy, making the city a kind of ancient power hub. Others suggested its design amplified cosmic or spiritual forces, turning it into a sacred center of healing or enlightenment. None of this had archaeological backing, but it gave Machu Picchu an aura of mystery that still attracts spiritual seekers today. Even darker were the rumors of Nazi occult expeditions. In the 1930s and 40s, stories circulated that German explorers and Nazi-backed researchers traveled through South America, searching for proof of Aryan ancestry or links to mythical civilizations like Atlantis. Some accounts claimed Machu Picchu was on their list of sites to investigate. Whether true or exaggerated, these rumors tied the Romans to one of the most disturbing movements of the modern era. The secrets beneath the soil. For years, most eyes were fixed on Machu Picchu's terraces and temples, but some researchers began asking a deeper question: what lies beneath? Ancient sites across the Andes have revealed hidden tombs and chambers, and many suspected Machu Picchu was no different. The problem was that digging under the ruins was forbidden by Peru's Ministry of Culture, so traditional excavation was off the table. To get answers, scientists had to turn to non-invasive methods. In 2014, a joint French-Peruvian team used ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to scan the soil beneath some of Machu Picchu's most sacred structures. The results were astonishing. The scans showed anomalies, voids and cavities beneath the ground that did not match natural formations. One of the largest appeared under the Temple of the Three Windows, a structure central to Inca ritual life. To the team, it looked like a sealed chamber, untouched for centuries. By 2016, researcher Thierry Jamin went public with the claim that these voids could be royal tombs, perhaps even holding the remains of Pachacuti himself, the emperor believed to have commissioned Machu Picchu. The idea of Pachacuti's burial hidden beneath the city electrified the public. If true, it would be one of the most important archaeological finds in South America, a discovery on the level of Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt. But there was a problem. The Peruvian government refused to allow excavations. Officials argued that opening the chambers could destabilize the fragile ruins. Critics accused them of secrecy and questioned whether the state was hiding something too valuable to expose. For years, the debate raged. Were these just natural fissures in the bedrock, or was Machu Picchu sitting on a hidden royal necropolis? This gap between hints and hard evidence became a major frustration. Technology like GPR and electrical resistivity mapping could reveal anomalies, but they could not tell us with certainty what those voids contained. Were they tombs, hidden storerooms, or simply empty fractures in the mountain? Archaeology had reached a limit, and that is where the next stage began. By the late 2010s, scientists turned to more advanced geological scans, particle physics, and eventually AI to see the invisible with clarity. If Machu Picchu was hiding something under its stones, only the next generation of technology could reveal it. That breakthrough came in 2019 when a geologist looked at Machu Picchu not as an archaeologist's puzzle, but as a geological map waiting to be read. The 2019 geological discovery. In 2019, Brazilian geologist Rualdo Menegat looked at Machu Picchu with a different lens. He started with rock. He gathered satellite images, mapped lineaments, long surface cracks you can see from above, and then walked the site to check where those cracks matched real fractures in the granite. He compared these fracture maps with the city plan: temples, terraces, stairways, fountains, and walls. What he found changed the conversation. Machu Picchu sits on the crossing of two major fault systems. One set of faults trends northeast to southwest. The other trends northwest to southeast. These two systems cross under the city's core, right where the most important public spaces and temples stand. At first glance, this seems like a terrible decision. Faults can move. Earthquakes can shatter stone. Why would anyone build a city on that? Menegat's data showed a different story. The Incas used the faults. They did not fear them. The faults had already fractured the granite over centuries of tectonic stress. That meant the rock broke along clean planes, which made it easier to split, shape, and fit stones. The Incas were master stone workers, but they had no steel tools. Pre-fractured granite turned the mountain itself into a natural quarry. Instead of cutting every block from raw bedrock, workers could pry and trim stones that were already split by nature. This is one reason the finest walls at Machu Picchu have such tight joints without mortar. The fractures also worked like hidden pipes. Water from rainfall and snowmelt higher in the range moved through these cracks and collected as perennial springs near the city. The Incas captured this water with a precision canal that carried flow into a line of 16 fountains, the first reserved for the ruler. In a high mountain site where water security could mean life or death, the faults gave a reliable, gravity-fed supply with no pumps and no external source. Ask yourself, would any ruler approve a remote city without guaranteed water? Just as important, the fractured bedrock improved drainage. Machu Picchu sits in one of the wettest parts of the Andes, with heavy seasonal rains and frequent downpours. On steep slopes, that is a recipe for landslides. Meneghat's work fit with engineering studies that showed the Incas built thick drainage layers under plazas, paths, and terraces, coarse stone, gravel, and sand laid over fractured bedrock. Water could move down and away instead of pooling. This is a major reason the site has not collapsed after 5 centuries of storms and earthquakes. Meneghat then compared structure orientations with the mapped faults. The alignments were striking. Many stairways, terrace edges, and major walls run parallel to the local fractures. Key open spaces sit where rock is more jointed and easier to carve. In other words, the city plan mirrors the geology. This is not random. It looks like site selection and design were guided by the underground pattern. The conclusion is simple and powerful. The Incas did not build here despite the dangers. They built here because the geology gave them advantages that no flat valley could match. Stone ready to shape, water ready to capture, and drainage ready to protect the city. This turns the old logic on its head. The dangerous ridge was not a burden, it was a feature. Does this mean the Incas understood faults like modern geologists do? Not in modern terms, but they had generations of observation. They knew which cliffs yielded good blocks, where springs emerged, and which slopes stayed stable after rain. They translated that knowledge into planning rules. Follow the fractures, harvest the rock, catch the water, drain the slopes, and anchor your buildings to what the mountain already offers. Still, some doubted this idea. That is, until 2025, when new technologies confirmed it beyond question. The 2025 confirmation: science strikes again. By 2025, archaeologists and geologists returned to Machu Picchu with a crucial goal: to test whether the 2019 theory about fault line engineering could truly hold up under modern analysis. For years, skeptics had argued that the Incas couldn't possibly have understood geology in such a systematic way. Now, with new technologies available, researchers were finally in a position to find out. The first step was LIDAR scanning. LIDAR, light detection and ranging, uses laser pulses from drones or aircraft to create precise 3D models of landscapes, even through heavy vegetation. Earlier, LiDAR work around the Andes had uncovered hidden terraces and road systems, but in 2025, the scans focused directly on Machu Picchu's ridge. What stood out was how the site's platforms, plazas, and terraces appeared to follow subtle natural breaks in the terrain. The technology allowed scientists to see beneath centuries of soil buildup and vegetation, revealing that the placement of certain structures was closely tied to the underlying geology. Next came the application of AI pattern recognition. Researchers fed massive data sets, including measurements of building orientations, terrace layouts, and mapped fracture lines into machine learning systems. The algorithms highlighted correlations that would have been impossible to see by eye. What emerged was a clear, repeating alignment between the man-made city and the natural fault network. This wasn't just one or two coincidences. Across multiple sectors of the site, the AI showed that walls, staircases, and ceremonial areas consistently matched the directions and intersections of geological fractures. For the first time, the relationship between architecture and geology could be demonstrated with statistical certainty. In addition, researchers deployed advanced geophysical sensors, updated versions of tools like ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography. These instruments traced how water moved through the bedrock under the site. They revealed active underground channels where rainwater and snowmelt traveled through fault-line cracks, surfacing at springs that still feed Machu Picchu's fountains today. This confirmed that the Incas were not simply lucky in finding water. They had deliberately built in a place where the mountain's natural channels could be tapped with precision. Taken together, the 2025 results provided a new level of confidence. The earlier geological theory was no longer just a compelling interpretation, it was backed by independent, high-resolution data from multiple technologies. LiDAR demonstrated alignment with surface and subsurface structures, AI confirmed patterned correlations, and geophysical imaging proved that water supply was directly tied to the fault system. The impact of these results was immediate. Where once there had been debate, by 2025, there was broad agreement. Machu Picchu was not an accident of location or a symbolic choice that ignored practicality. It was a carefully engineered masterpiece, built on a site where the mountain itself provided every advantage. For the Inca, geology was not an obstacle, it was the foundation of their design. But Machu Picchu was only the beginning. Once scientists saw this, they realized it was part of a much bigger pattern. A hidden blueprint across the empire. By 2025, scholars began to realize Machu Picchu was not an isolated case. The same methods applied at other Inca sites showed a repeating pattern. The capital city of Cusco, for example, has long been known to sit at the meeting point of two fault systems. The layout of its most important temples, including the Coricancha, Temple of the Sun, follows those geological lines. Earthquakes that destroyed colonial Spanish buildings often left the older Inca walls standing, hinting that the Incas had chosen their locations with stability in mind. At Ollantaytambo, the massive terraces and fortress walls rise from a valley where natural fractures create both strong building stone and abundant water channels. Archaeological surveys found that its irrigation system taps directly into springs formed by the same geological cracks. Pisac, another mountaintop city, shows similar choices. Its ceremonial structures and terraced slopes are positioned along fault-related ridges, giving both defensive advantage and steady access to water. The evidence suggested that this was not coincidence. It pointed to an imperial strategy, repeated again and again. This realization forced a deeper question. If we were wrong about Machu Picchu, what else have we misunderstood about the Incas? For over a century, many historians assumed the Incas lacked advanced science and relied mainly on brute labor. Yet the growing evidence suggested they had a form of environmental knowledge that rivaled modern engineering. If the Incas were capable of this level of precision, then why did we underestimate them for so long? The answer lies not in Machu Picchu itself, but in the way history was written. For centuries, Western scholars framed the Incas as brilliant builders but not as thinkers. Their achievements were often described as the product of mass labor, not careful science. The narrative suggested they could move mountains with sheer manpower, but not that they had the intellectual tools to study the earth and plan with intent. The discoveries of the last decade forced that bias into the open. The real secret, then, is that Machu Picchu was never the paradox we thought it was. It wasn't a city defying logic. It was one built on principles we were too blind to recognize. More advanced, more spiritual, and more intentional than we ever gave it credit for. Machu Picchu forces us to admit the uncomfortable truth. It isn't what we thought at all. What do you think about the Machu Picchu's engineering strategy? Comment down below.